Hello, everybody. In this exercise, we'll be unprogramming the brainwashing that has been administered on the human family for thousands of years by demonic people. First, we'll cover the material that we all have access to online. Then after that, I'll give you my personal opinion on what's really going on and why the lies persist in the face of mountainous evidence. Let's dive in. All right, we're going to start here on Wikipedia at the page for black slave owners in the United States. And if you want to find that through a search engine, you just put that term into a search engine and you'll find this page. So you can see we have a pretty substantial list of slave owners and colonist type people in the early America that were black. Now what I would encourage everyone to do is to study all of these. What I'm going to do is I don't want to make this video too long, so I'm going to focus on one of these individuals that I think is one of the most interesting in the list, and that is Mr. Anthony Johnson. Let me see if I can get my browser to read this out loud.
Anthony Johnson, circa 1600-1670, was a black Angolan known for achieving wealth in the early 17th century colony of Virginia. He was one of the first African Americans whose right to own a slave for life was recognized by the Virginia courts. Held as an indentured servant in 1621, he earned his freedom after several years and was granted land by the colony. 1. He later became a tobacco farmer in Maryland. He attained great wealth after completing his term as an indentured servant and has been referred to as the Black Patriarch of the first community of Negro property owners in America. 1.
Now here we have to take a little break and make a distinction. What is an indentured servant as opposed to a chattel slave? And everybody just likes to assume that everybody and their mama who was here in early America was a chattel slave. But in reality, in the beginning of early America, there was a system of indentured servitude. And I'm going to read you you can find hundreds of these contracts online, but I'm going to read you what they kind of express. So basically it says, hath put himself and by fifth preference doth voluntarily and of his own free will and accord put himself in an apprentice to blah 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 blah, whatever the guy's name is, of New York, with him to live, and after the manner of an apprentice to serve from the first day of November, maybe? Anno Domini 1740, till the full term of 5 years. So what does that mean? That means when people, it was basically a overseas opportunity to get some work done, make some wealth for yourself, better yourself, pull yourself out of whatever poverty you might be in or struggle you might be in your own country. All these people were coming over and they had indentured servitude contracts that they would have to sign. Now, Mr. Anthony Johnson was one of those such individuals. So everybody has to get it out of their head right now that people were going over to Africa. Europeans were going over to Africa with big nets and just grabbing people up, grabbing all these helpless Africans up, which is also not the case. That's another big, huge lie that's been debunked, and people don't want to accept it and believe it still to this day, but that's the reality. And here's an image that shows Africans capturing and enslaving one another so they can sell them out. And that's how the majority of people were sold into the slave market. And the ones that did, the majority of the capturing, were their own people. And they were doing that for profiteering. Now here's what I find to be the most fascinating part about Anthony Johnson, is that he owned a slave, or he had a slave named John Casor.
In 1655 became the first person of African descent in the 13 colonies to be declared as a slave for life as a result of a civil suit.
So did you catch that? The first person of African descent, the first black person in all of the 13 colonies to be declared as a slave for life as a result of a civil suit that came at the hands of guess who? Anthony Johnson. And it's all right here.
Anthony Johnson, a black Angolan, was an indentured servant brought to the James River area of Virginia on the ship James in 1621. 4. During the late 1640s, Johnson moved with his family to Northampton County on the eastern shore of Virginia. 5. He acquired property on Pungoteague Creek and began raising livestock. 4. He was the first known African landowner in the colony. By July 1651, he had expanded his holdings, which he referred to in a court record as mine own ground, to 250 acres, 100 hectares, then a considerable tract by Eastern Shore standards. He was prosperous enough to import 5 indentured servants of his own and was granted an additional 250 acres, 100 hectares, as head rights for bringing in workers. 4. In 1653, John Kacer, an African employed by Johnson, filed what later became known as a freedom suit. He said that he had been imported as a 7 or 8 years indentured servant and that, after attempting to reclaim his indenture, he had been told by Johnson that he didn't have one. According to the civil court documents, Kacer demanded his freedom. Anthony Johnson was in a fear. Upon this, his son-in-law, his wife, and his 2 sons persuaded the said Anthony Johnson to set the said John Kacer free. 6. Kacer went to work for Robert Parker, an English colonist who, along with his brother George, later testified that they knew Kacer had an indenture. 6. One commentator said that Johnson may have feared losing his head rights land if the case went to court. 7. Anthony Johnson brought suit in Northampton County Court against Robert Parker in 1654 for detaining his Negro servant, John Kacer, saying he never did see any indenture, but that he had a Negro for his life. In the case of Johnson v. Parker, the court of Northampton County upheld Johnson's right to hold Kacer as a slave, saying in its ruling of March 8, 1655.
Fascinating. I bet you if you ask 99.9% of humans on this whole entire earth who they think were the first, or what they think the race of the first person to own a slave for lifelong, a chattel slave in America, ask them what race you think that person was. I guarantee you they're going to think it's white. It's because this information is suppressed by academia in our whole social arena. This information is suppressed. And when somebody starts talking about it, everybody starts getting all riled up. Because demons. Now again, I want to urge everyone to check out this full list. You see, all I did was went through Anthony Johnson and John Kacer, and we talked about that one guy. And you can see how interesting of a situation that is, where we find out the first person, the first colonist in America to own a slave lifelong was a black dude. And before that, what it was an overseas work program where you can sign an indentured servitude contract and get rich here in America right alongside the white man. And I can guarantee you this list right here is not complete. This list is probably just a drop in the bucket of how many black people were involved in early American slavery, profiteering just like anybody else was. Now, the interesting thing is that slavery was just the way things were back then. It wasn't an evil in their eyes. It was just a way, it was a business. It was a way people made money. And it was just more of a commonplace thing where people weren't all up in arms about it. You know, it was unfortunate if you were on the wrong side of it, yeah, but it was just an accepted thing. And white people, the Europeans, lost so many of their kind and their lives trying to abolish slavery in Africa and in other places when everybody else wanted to keep it going. So I think white people deserve reparations instead of black people or instead of anybody else, because they sacrificed and lost the most. And that's the only reason why we have so many free people running around the world today, or relatively free. I mean, none of us are really free, but we're more relatively free than we were then, and we have to thank Europeans for that. All right, there's something else I want to show you guys. It's the Barbary slave trade. Now, what was happening during the transatlantic slave trade, the Barbary slave trade was going on just about at the same time. They were kind of like overlapping slave trade periods. And Arabs were profiting off of both of the slave trades because they controlled the waterways.
The Barbary slave trade involved slave markets on the Barbary coast of North Africa, which included the Ottoman states of Algeria, Tunisia, and Tripolitania and the independent Sultanate of Morocco, between the 16th and 19th century. The Ottoman states in North Africa were nominally under Ottoman suzerainty. European slaves were acquired by Barbary pirates in slave raids on ships and by raids on coastal towns from Italy to the Netherlands, Ireland, and the southwest of Britain, as far north as Iceland and into the eastern Mediterranean. The Ottoman Eastern Mediterranean was the scene of intense piracy. 1. As late as the 18th century, piracy continued to be a consistent threat to maritime traffic in the Aegean. 2.
Okay, so there's something I want to mention about this. Where's the reparations for this? Where's the discussion about reparations to white people for this atrocity? And where are the records? What happened to these over 1 million European slaves? Is there any record? We have pretty good records in the United States. There's indentured servitude contracts all over the place that can track early American Africans that came here. They worked here. They got rich here. Then they started families. I mean, if your last name is Johnson, and you're black, do you deserve reparations if you're related to Mr. Anthony Johnson, very wealthy colonist who had his own slaves? Do you deserve reparations? That's my question. No, you don't. And the only reason why you act entitled is because you don't know the truth. You've been hoodwinked. You've been played for a sucker. And when we play black people for suckers like this, they have a victimhood mentality and they will never, ever be on an equal playing field with everybody else with that kind of mentality. They're always going to be down below. Now, the other side of that coin is white people have this guilt mentality where they're just self-destructing. They're laying down, putting their necks open to the side and saying, please slit my throat because my ancestors were so bad. They're a bunch of idiots because they don't know reality either. And they're messing up the whole world with their insane, suicidal, self-destructive mission to pay everybody back. So white people are getting messed up by this. And by the way, I'm Arab. But white people are getting messed up by this. Black people are getting messed up by this. You know who didn't get messed up by this? The Arabs. They made a whole bunch of money. And guess what? They don't have any guilt. They don't have victimhood mentality. And they pretty much played the game with everybody else. They facilitated the whole slave trade. They controlled the waterways. They profiteered off the whole thing. And they also had their slaves. So here's an old painting that represents the Barbary slave trade. Now look what's going on in this picture. We have a black man capturing a white woman. And there's white women in the background there who are sex slaves or whatever they are. Black man captured white woman selling to Arabs who were sitting there smoking their hookahs. What happened to this woman? She probably got raped repeatedly and maybe cooked and eaten. Who knows what these savages were doing to these people? But everybody's was savage back then. We're a bunch of over-emotional softies now. If any of us went back to this time, we just wouldn't make it. We would just drop dead from shock. Now, let's go even back further in time to ancient Egypt. Now, look at this artwork real close. What's going on here? You can see that there's a black elite masterclass being tended to by a much lighter skinned, I would say white or Chinese, some kind of Asian. It could be Arab, really light Arabs, I don't know. But it's black people with basically white people being their slave or servant class. So where's the reparations for that? There was untold wealth that was built upon the backs of these light-skinned slaves thousands of years ago. So if we're going to play the reparations game, let's go back to the beginning when Arabs started slavery, because those are the earliest records we have is from Arabs, and they're the ones who are writing about slavery in the most ancient documents. So the evidence we have says Arabs dabbled in it first, showed everybody how to do it. Africans started mastering it. Then the Europeans jumped into the whole stupid thing. But the Europeans are the only ones that brought an end to it. And they weren't even involved in it as long as the rest of the world was. They were involved in it in a relatively much shorter amount of time, and then they put an end to it. And they sacrificed so many of their own lives to make that beautiful thing happen. So Europeans should be thanked by everybody around the whole world. You got to stop hating on these people because they are what made the place nicer to live in. So my point is, if we're going to play the reparations game, we got to go back to the beginning and start there. Start with Arabs giving reparations to whoever they enslaved first. Africans, the African dynasties who were the Egyptian rulers, they have to give reparations to whoever they enslaved. The Arab Egyptian rulers had to give reparations to the Jews of today and all of this because they had Jewish slaves. And then maybe we can work our way to Europeans giving reparations to Black Americans, or rather all Americans. This is so stupid because we have propositions by idiotic people saying that all Americans using tax money should pay for reparations. It's so illogical and stupid to even propose such a thing because there's no way to track everybody. Like I said, what if you're a descendant of Anthony Johnson who had built great wealth owning slaves, plantations, farming? If you're a descendant of Anthony Johnson, I guarantee you're going to get reparations from these stupid idiots running our government. And basically, what that is theft. Straight theft. That's why I don't think reparations is going to work in the United States. I don't think it's ever going to happen. And information like this is going to keep pushing through the demon shield to start reaching everybody eventually. And I just wanted to throw this in for just a little extra bonus where we see that black slaves, Indian masters, in early America. So, Indian masters to black slaves. Indians were slaves, black were slaves, whites were slaves, everybody was slaves. You wouldn't believe what the Irish and all these other people went through centuries ago. And those people, their descendants are living here in America now. And it would be really messed up if those white people had to pay, those Irish people had to pay reparations to some other slave group that had slave ancestors. It makes no sense at all. Because demons. Because demons. Now here's the last thing I'm going to bother you guys with. It's a picture of this new stupid movie that came out. And this shows you how the entire entertainment industry in America is corrupt and demonic, because this movie, The Woman King, is a complete lie. And all you have to do is go and check out the actual history of this, I think it was Dahomey tribe, they call them, the Dahomeys. And they were the ones, the Dahomeys were the ones that wanted to keep the slave trade going while the French were trying to put a stop to it. And they had a war. And the French, and it was mostly a female fighting force, was the Dahomeys. And the French, I think it was like just a few, it was a relatively few French men slaughtered. I don't know how many of these ladies. They just couldn't. These women couldn't fight against the force like the French had, or the organization, the training. I don't know what made the French so much stronger. Maybe it was the fact that they were men and these were women. I don't know. But it was a really unbalanced slaughtering. The French really threw it on them. And so what the movie tries to tell you, though, is that these are the heroes, these black women, who were, in fact, the ones in reality, the ones who were the people who were trying to keep slavery going. So this is how these lies persist. And you can go and you can look for any kind of slavery movie from the last 50 years in the United States, all filled with lies. 12 Years a Slave, all the movies that Danny Glover and Oprah Winfrey were in, Roots, all of that stuff is built upon lies. Django Unchained, lies. Quentin Tarantino, he's just an entertainer. He doesn't know the truth. He's not looking into these things. But he made a movie full of lies. But it wasn't supposed to be a true story or anything like that. It's a very entertaining movie. I actually like Django Unchained. It's one of my favorite movies. But this movie, The Woman King, they say in the beginning, based on true events or based on a true story, something like that. Bunch of demonic liars. So demons, we got your number now. We know what you're doing, and you're exposed. And every little move you make to keep this crap going, we're going to expose you, and you're going to feel stupid because your lies are getting exposed. When, just 10, 20 years ago, especially before the internet, it'd be so easy to brainwash everybody. But it's getting a little bit harder now. So what I believe is going to happen is these evil forces, these demonic forces that have been doing things for centuries here, they're going to start slowly removing all of this evidence. All the stuff I'm showing you, the government might even contact Wikipedia and other sources and say, hey, is there any way we can remove this? Because we're not going to be able to destroy America and white people if all of this truth is sitting right there for them to just go and see and spread around. So please, Wikipedia, can you remove the truth so we can get our evil agenda done? Thanks. I guarantee you that's going to happen any day now. Now, I have a feeling I'm going to get a little bit of kickback, maybe, from some people for making a video like this and exposing this kind of truth. So here's my identity for anyone that may be identity obsessed. If you're somebody who's obsessed with skin colors and crotches, this is what I got. I'm a male. I'm an Arab that is spiritually ambiguous. I'm not an atheist. I expect to be judged when I die, and I appreciate the brilliant, flawless programming that exists all around us. That being said, I will never join any one particular religion. I'm obsessed with religions and philosophy, so I study them all like on a hobby level. So that's my identity. I'm a straight, male, Arab that is spiritually ambiguous, but not an atheist. Now, my advice that plenty of people have been saying this lately, and even back in time, Martin Luther King and everybody else, it's best to assess each person on an individual basis instead of by their identity or physical attributes. Except maybe if it's a short person like me, because short people got more reason to live. No, I'm just kidding. I love my fellow short people. Now, I used to talk about this stuff on Facebook when I used to have an account there, and nobody would share this information with anybody they knew. They would watch me post it, and they would just ignore it. And I think that's the reason why these lies, these demonic lies, are so pervasive and accepted by so many people globally, is because so many people love the twisted, demonic way that things are right now. For instance, people of color are getting over on white people and taking advantage of them, basically stealing from them. Affirmative action is theft in light of all these truths coming out now. Affirmative action is certainly theft. Now, seeing the way that these demons can twist history to suit some kind of agenda or narrative that they're after, the best advice I can give is to regard all historical record as skewed and not 100% true. Even the material I presented to you in this video. Don't just believe it, but look into it. That's all I'm saying. And we have really no way to verify all of this at this point in time. We just have to look back at history and kind of sift through and see what's what and make a determination from that. Because nobody that was alive then is alive now. And a lot of the people that are old now in the United States, old black people, they're just as brainwashed as everybody else. The civil rights movement was one of the worst things to ever happen to black people and women in this country. And now black people and women are the most, seems like they're the most unhappy they've ever been. They're the most angry they've ever been. They're the most hateful that they've ever been. And I think that the reason why is because of all this brainwashing that's come from demonic entities. It's possible that these people never even existed. Anthony Johnson may just be a made-up character by some twisted people who want to warp history. I don't know. But I don't think so. I think he was an actual person that existed. And so we can look at some examples right now of history being rewritten in our time, right in front of our face. And when it's happening right now in front of your face, it really can't be denied. You can't say, oh, that was back then and nobody can verify. Well, we can verify today because they're lying and changing history right now. Here's the proof. Boom. There's your liars changing history. And it's not all black people. You can't judge people by their skin color. It's just evil black people. You got evil white people, evil Arabs, evil Chinamen, evil everybody. Every group has their bad apples. Every group has, I think, mostly good apples. We're all a bunch of morons for being obsessed with skin colors and crotches. And you're going to mess everything up with your dumb ideas. Now, there's a couple of more videos that I want to make along these lines of brainwashing and the unprogramming that's going to need to occur to fix all of that. So I think my next video, I'm still going to do programming tutorials, guys. Don't worry. That's what I do for a living. I program and design for a living, so I'm always doing new things, studying new technologies and whatnot. So calm down. But I want to jump into this arena where people are sharing information because I think that there's a lack of it. There's a serious lack of truth seekers coming out and telling the truth. And that is what's going to fix everything. The only reason they can get away with all this is because everybody just swallows it and accepts it. They pull things straight out of their butt and put it right into your mouth and you swallow it. And a lot of people are just evil. We have to have this evil and we have to have good for the dynamics of the programming that the Creator made. It's all necessary. Now these people who are evil, maybe they don't know they're evil. They're programmed to be evil and they do evil deeds, that's for sure. They would rather believe the lie to keep the destruction and division going. So you could tell them this truth and they'll just ignore it. They may be demons that are just unreachable. And demons will wriggle in agony when the truth is expressed to them. You could see it in their face right away. You can tell a demon right away because when you show them some truth or evidence, you can see them get uncomfortable, upset. They want to shut the conversation down. That's the demon. So maybe in the next video I'm going to cover Native Americans, the lies, the constant crazy lies about Native Americans or so-called Native American Indians on the North American continent. There's a whole lot to cover on that topic. And I'm going to do a video about simulation theory. That's a whole nother dangerous group of idiots right there. Everybody who believes in simulation theory, that's a dangerous thing forming, and it's getting bigger and bigger. Everybody's calling everybody NPCs, like they're just bytes in a computer and you can kill them off and they don't matter. This is how classes are divided. They're dividing people up by their worth. If you don't move and shake in this world, and if you don't matter, if you're just a bum on the street, you're an NPC and your life doesn't matter? Come on. These people are crazy. Your life is just as important as the billionaire like Elon Musk sitting in his ivory tower, which I have no problem with Elon Musk. I'm just saying those guys, they live in ivory towers, so that's why I said that. But actually, he's pretty modest compared to most. Let's say Bill Gates. He's got this huge giant thing. But what was I saying? Yeah, I'm gonna be covering different material. I also want to cover. I told you how I was kind of obsessed with religions and I study them all kind of as a hobby. What I'm going to do is make a video about, I'm really fascinated why every single ancient religion expressed in their writings, even Hinduism and Buddhism, they kind of say, hey, don't be gay and don't really trust women. Don't trust women and gay to manage or run anything in society or teach people or anything like that. All of the ancients gave that warning out in their religions. I think almost every single religion. And in Hinduism, you'll find they're contrarian. They'll say in one Veda, don't the gay stuff and don't the women, the blah, blah, blah. And then in another Veda, they'll contradict that. So they get away with everything by saying, oh, here it says this. See, our religion says accept all the stuff. But then in the same religion, you can find stuff where it says don't accept it. Yeah, you can expect more of this from me. And also, I'm going to be continuing doing a whole lot of programming and design tutorials because, like I said, that's what I do for a living. And you guys, I want to address one more thing. You guys who might be subscribed to me that come to my channel when I go off topic from programming, like this video here, it's off topic from programming and design stuff. You try to come, when I put videos like this up, you try to come and say, hey, only do programming tutorials to you. Only do programming and design tutorials, Adam. You're probably one of the demons because you know I'm spitting the truth and you don't like it. Because spitting the truth is like splashing holy water on a demon. It's going to burn them. They're going to wriggle in agony. They're going to cry out to their daddy down below. So this message is for you. I know exactly why you're telling me to only make programming tutorials. Because you're shaking in your boots. What's wrong with some of you people? You're crazy. All right, guys. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.